Hi everybody, David Frew coming to you from my kitchen. Like all other media stars these days, I'm bunkered, sequestered, waiting for the light at the end of the long tunnel. And I hope that you are, and you're taking care of yourselves as well. Because of the special circumstances of the last month or two, Jefferson has decided to bring you my next couple of lectures remotely. So we're going to patch them together at my home, send them to you, hope you love them. Today's lecture is entitled How to Be Happy, and today's lecture takes me back to my roots from the 1960s and 1970s as an organizational psychologist. I think I know what you're thinking. You were wondering why maybe you're listening to this lecture from a historian. To be fair, I've never really been technically trained as a historian. I love history. I'm interested in history. I can see the connections between organizational psychology and history, but most of the stuff that I have done in the area of quote-unquote history have been more psychological than historical. Today, we're going to be talking about how to be happy. I'm going to be kind of taking you back to the 1960s and 70s and my academic training, where I sort of just blundered into a sub-area of stress management, and how to be happy. Technical organizational psychologists would call it
How to be happy. Now, not to oversimplify things, but do you think Jimmy Buffett can make you happy? I think he probably can. Nothing more happy than listening to Jimmy Buffett music. But this is not the scientific explanation of being happy. Maybe we can do better than that definition. But I don't want to discount it either. Listen to Jimmy Buffett music, but also be aware of the fact that happiness is a chemical condition. The biochemistry of happiness. Think of this as kind of a continuum from being terribly, terribly unhappy to terribly, terribly, terribly happy. Of course, we always want to be as happy as we can, because happiness co-varies with being productive, getting along with people, and having your life go well. So think of happiness as an actual physiologic state. And think of our lives, and everybody has these issues, as being sort of on a swinging scale between happy and depressed. There's some chemicals that increase when we get happy. Maybe if you listen to a Jimmy Buffett song, these chemicals pick up. The happy chemicals are, we can measure these, they've been measured, there's a good bit of research about this. Serotonin, epinephrine, and norepinephrine. We have neurotransmitters in our brain, and kind of like those transmitters move those chemicals around and they make other things happy, all kinds of other good things happy. The alternative chemicals which raise depression, which shift you from being happy to being sad, or monoamine oxidase, which breaks down serotonin. I want to think about this in a way that you could see, and you've seen this. Think of a continuum. Look around at your friends. There are some friends that have a giant smile on their face all the time. Smiling is so fun and so easy. The cute little kid on the left. And by the way, happiness is always more associated with babies and small children than adults. The older you get, maybe the more bad things happen to you, the more likely you're to become a victim of temporary or permanent RBF. That's a technical term. You've heard it before. You can Google this. Resting bitch face. And RBF is driven by chemistry, by the chemistry we just talked about. Now, I don't know if your mother told you this, but my mother used to say, don't make that face or it'll freeze like that. And of course, she was right. Mothers were right about more things than we would like to think. If you walk around being unhappy for enough times, your face will gradually freeze into the face on the right, which you probably don't want to have happen. So I can make you happy. Of course I can make you happy, and I have a bridge for sale. There's my favorite bridge, the bridge at Charleston. If you'd like to believe that I can make you happy, you just write a check and send it to me, and I'll give you a due bill on the bridge, and you can pretend that you became happy. I can't make you happy. You know who can make you happy? You can make you happy, and that's it. The only person that can make you happy is yourself. In my days of teaching graduate students at Gannon, they always said to me, okay, tell us what we have to do to be really happy and to really like our jobs. And I would say, well, I can't do that. You have to do that yourself. And one of the fun things about happiness and or the connection between happiness and liking your job satisfaction, is that unless you get to like your existing job, which sometimes you don't, you're not going to be able to get another one. When you go interviewing for a job and you tell your prospective employer who asks, well, why you're leaving that last job? Well, you say, I hate it. It's terrible. I hate my boss. I hate my coworkers. I hate my work. If the person that's thinking about hiring you has read anything or has any experience, he'll probably understand that the power of past behavior predicting future behavior is at work here. Everybody wants to hire somebody that loves their job, and therefore they don't want to leave it. It's a conundrum. In the 1960s, the end of the 1960s, I thought I reached my end as being an engineer and I had to go do something different. So I took a graduate assistantship, actually a fellowship, and went off to school for 3 years. I did a 3-year full-time tour of duty at Kent State University. And here's how I got to Kent. I graduated with a master's degree at Gannon back in the 60s, the middle 60s. And I made some applications and was applying and was accepted at lots of nice schools. One of my favorite schools was the New School for Social Research in New York. And I went to look at that school and I thought, oh, geez, too scary. I have 3 little kids. I just had twin babies, 3 kids under a year old looking to go to school. I didn't think I was ready to take them to Manhattan. I thought I would go to a nice peaceful place, like the place you see on the left. Well, I had originally planned to go to Case. And the reason I was going to go to Case is because Case was the home of Fredrick Herzberg. Google him. He was one of the early gurus of organizational psychology. And he was at Case. And I was accepted at Case. And I was excited to go to Case. And then about the time that I was up there at Case talking about how I was going to make this transition, Case and Western merged. And as a result of the Case-Western merger, all the people in the organizational behavior group there decided they had to get out. They couldn't tolerate being at Case-Western. Half of them went to NYU, and they asked would I like to go with them. I'd been accepted to Case, and they were happy to take me along. NYU had the same little problem that I associated with the new school. I wasn't sure I wanted to take 3 little kids and go to New York. So the other half of the faculty members were going to Kent State University to get a fresh start and build a fabulous, fabulous organizational behavior program. And I went with them, and I went with them because of the picture on the left. Lovely pastoral campus, growing school, gentle, easy, family friendly. And then in 1970, look what happened on the right. Yes, I was there for the shootings. It got ugly, but fortunately for me, not the people that were killed, that was toward the end of my time there. Around 1970, when I was finishing at Kent after my 3-year stint, almost 3 years, Gannon University was starting an MBA program. And while I never had any expectations or dreams of coming back to Erie, when I saw that they were opening up an MBA program and some faculty members that I had remembered there from my days as a graduate student called to tell me, I ended up coming to Gannon to help them start their MBA program. And every MBA program, of course, has a sequence in organizational psychology / organizational behavior, where you teach people who are going to be managers and leaders how to use the basics of organizational psychology to make people happy with their jobs and productive. Happiness, I'm happy. Job satisfaction, I like my job. And productivity, they're all correlates. When one goes up, the other 2 go up. If you become unhappy, your job satisfaction goes down. If you become job dissatisfied, your happiness goes down, as does your productivity. So let me oversimplify for you what organizational psychology is really all about. It's different from clinical psychology, although I took some clinical courses. It's different from social psychology, although I took some social psychology courses. Essentially, organizational psychologists like to identify a reasonable number of stable personality dimensions. For example, Introversion, extroversion. Chances are, if you were a highly introverted kid, you will be a highly introverted adult. People don't really generally change from introverted to extroverted. So what people that were in my line of business would do would be to try to figure out how to test personalities and then match the personalities with jobs. And if you had an introvert in a job that was good for an introvert, likely his job satisfaction or her job satisfaction and his productivity and her productivity and his happiness and her happiness would all go up. So we in the organizational psychology trade would tell ourselves that we were kind of like psychologists because we were making people happy. But the way we got hired by companies and or the reason why business schools would hire us to try to ply our trade with graduate students was generally all about productivity. Not to oversimplify, but lots of organizations don't care so much about job satisfaction as they do about productivity. Now, there were enlightened people. One of my favorites was Jack Welch. Jack Welch clearly understood the relationship when he was at GE between job satisfaction and productivity. This isn't to whitewash Jack or GE and say that they did everything right, because there have been a few problems there lately. But Jack Welch, one of his primary metrics for measuring the progress of a business was, first, was it 1 or 2 in its industry? And number 2, were people getting job satisfaction, and was their job satisfaction increasing? That's an easy one to measure. There I am at Kent, and come out of the closet on this one, tell you that I have always been a gym rat. There's nothing more fun for me than going to the gym and doing stuff. I'm a handball player, like to play basketball when I was younger, run, lift weights, run around and do crazy things. So one of the first things that I did when I was at Kent was to wander over to the gym. And I'd be over there at lunchtime doing whatever everybody was doing, and I started to notice a crowd of older people. Maybe I was 26 at the time. These old guys were in their 40s. And they were out doing like fitness drills, running, doing push-ups, and they were being driven around the field, outside field, by a guy, this guy right here, Dr. Larry Golding. So I pretty soon sidled up to Golding and asked what was going on. Turned out that Golding was in the middle of a longitudinal study. He was doing the relationship between exercise and serum cholesterol. So Golding was really stationed in the School of Physical Education, and he didn't have as much statistical horsepower over there as he needed. And after we started talking, he hired me part-time. I kind of had those 3 kids and needed some extra money to help him do statistics. While I was doing statistics and getting to know all the people that were in this program, all these adult people, guys at the advanced age of 45 and 50 that were out running laps and doing exercises and swimming in the pool, I started to notice how happy they seemed to be. Next thing, I'm talking to these guys, and I'm sure that they're happier than the average person. Pretty soon, Golding agreed to let me measure the participants' job satisfaction, which I did. And as a group, I learned that they had significantly higher than average job satisfaction. Significant at the 001 level, big time. I was really excited about this and ran back to the School of Business where I was being trained, told them what I found, and they told me to mind my own business and do something more important. That was just too radical and too crazy. So I bided my time. I grabbed up a couple of research and dissertation topics that made my dissertation mentors and my faculty happier. And I resolved that when I got to my first job, I was going to really spend a lot of time on this. So let's go to the issue of measurements and measurement complications. You know, each one of us has at least 3 different personalities, identities. There's our real identity, if there is such a thing. Could ask philosophers about that question. The facade identity, that's the one that we attempt to project to other people. The idealized identity, that's the one that we wish we were. And when we go to measure somebody on any one of these measures, whether it's a psychology measure, a personality measure, a job satisfaction measure, or whatever, we have faced a question of which answer are we getting? Is somebody that we're measuring giving us the answer to a question that they want us to think or that they like to think themselves, or the real one, or is it some combination of those things? And how much energy are they spending managing that? That's an issue of psychoanalysis that I'll leave for another lecture. So how happy are you? Let's stop and find out. Let me introduce you to the normal distribution. Most everything is distributed normally. Heights, weights, personality dimensions. So if you want to go to a measure like introversion, extroversion, think about the crazy wild introverts on the left-hand side, the crazy wild extroverts on the right-hand side. Think about an average. Think about a standard deviation that plus or minus one of them separates 67% of everybody. So most everybody on the measure of introversion, extroversion is somewhere in the middle. That doesn't work that same way for happiness, job satisfaction, and productivity. However, you'll find places in the real world where satisfaction and productivity is extraordinarily high. Those are the places that tend to do well in the world of business. And the opposite, you'll find places that are extraordinarily low. So you could use your common sense and try to put a pencil in the middle of that normal distribution and decide where you lie, or you could do something more sophisticated. Today's guru of standard deviation tests of job satisfaction is a fellow by the name of Diner, who's at the University of Illinois. And if you'll Google Diner, University of Illinois, go after life satisfaction or generalized life satisfaction or self-esteem or whatever, you'll find him, and you'll find his test right online. It's free. And Diner's average is 20 and his standard deviation is 5. So if you want to Google up Diner and take his test, which is sitting there waiting for you online, and he'd like it if you'd contribute your test to his pile of data. He's keeping data. You'll see that his average is 20 on his psychometric, and his standard deviation is 5. That means on the Diner test, 95% of people measure between 15 and 25. 99% of people measure between 10 and 30. This works just like any other standardized measurement, which makes you have some confidence in it. So have some fun. Read the work of Diner. You'll like it. Now here's what's happened between 1969, when I was going to graduate school, and 2019, which is a technical lifetime. There are way more standardized tests. We call them psychometrics. We have standardized tests for everything. We also have highly sophisticated statistical software now, SPSS, SASS. We have enough power on a little laptop computer to make the stuff that we had in a room full of computer wheels spinning in 1969 look silly. You can take your ordinary smartphone and run statistical analyses, which are more sophisticated than the stuff we could do it would take us weeks, and we have to spend money at the computer center doing it. We also now have multivariate statistical analysis, so we can have more than one X variable and more than one Y variable and see how things work. And of course, since that time, the enormous development of computers. When we measure stuff, whether it's a psychological or a physiologic thing, like some of those internal chemical measures we talked about, for a measure to be useful, it has to be reliable. That means we get the same score run over and over again if you keep taking a test. So you don't like a scale if you jump on it and it says you're 200 pounds one time and 220 the next time. You'd like it to say the same thing over and over again. And you'd like the instrument, whether it's an instrument that measures your personality or your job satisfaction or happiness, like the Diner instrument, to actually be valid, which means that it measures what it's said to measure. So when you pull up to get a gallon of gas, you'll see a little sticker on there that says somebody came along and says to you, you can be sure that a gallon is really a gallon. And the other thing we have to be concerned about when we do studies of this sort is the relationship between causality and correlation. So for years we knew that there was some sort of a correlation between smoking and lung cancer. The reason why we couldn't get the people that made cigarettes to accept and believe that was because they argued that that was not causality. It's not that smoking caused lung cancer. It was a simple artifact of correlation. The best argument was that there was something in your DNA that caused you to want to smoke and also caused you to get cancer. And maybe if you quit smoking, you just get frustrated and be more likely that you'll be unhappy and get cancer faster. The other thing that's happened between 69 and 9 is the complete birth of psychometric tests. There's a psychological test for everything these days. And if you want to have some fun, you can find them online. In 1975, this was 5 years after I came to Gannon, I took a semester off and went to McGill and started studying with Selye, who was the fellow that invented the term stress. Google him. He's an amazing fellow. He was a physician who also got a Ph.D., spent a lot of time at McGill, and convinced me during my time with him that what I was experiencing when I was watching exercise people have their job satisfaction go up was that the exercise was ameliorating stress. There's a good bit of literature on that now. We're confident that, and I've contributed to some of it in the literature, that exercise is a good way of burning off stress. We did some major Gannon studies during my years. We did a huge study at Hammermill funded by the National Institute for Mental Health, NIMH. It was a field experiment. We taught some people to exercise and some people to meditate and some people to do cognitive adjustments, and we measured to see which of those things had the greatest impact on stress. And I was one of the first advocates of using physiological measures of stress. So our measures of stress were serum cholesterol, blood pressure, galvanic skin response, and some other things. And you could still find me in journals and reporting on that study. It was a 2-year study. Me, and a couple of colleagues ended up having maybe a dozen really nice, really great publications based on that. Later, during the GE Crotonville Jack Welch years, we did General Electric studies at Crotonville, not in Erie, but at Crotonville, corporate headquarters on the Hudson River, where we demonstrated that either exercise or meditation reduced stress, increased job satisfaction, and increased productivity. The genetics of happiness. You're probably sitting there thinking, how happy am I? You're going to run and take that diner test, and you're going to have to ask yourself when you take the diner test, which of your 3 people that lives inside of you is taking that test? Is that the real you? Or is that the you want to be? Or is that the you want to project? You're going to have to think through that yourself. After you're thinking about this and wondering, how possible would it be for you to increase your happiness and job satisfaction by doing something like exercising moderately or doing some stress management via meditation? We'll get to that in a second. How much of what you experience in the world of happiness comes to you by virtue of your genetics? The best answer these days is 48%. That's a meta-analytic result. 48%. Do I know it's 48% for you? No, it could be 35, 40, 45, 50, 55. Just depends. And then 16% has to do with your situation, your job, your life, and your marriage are, for example, good ones to think about. So it's possible to figure out how to improve your job, your life, and your marriage, and make your job satisfaction and happiness go up. And also your ability to personally adapt to events, to learn how to be flexible, to learn how to deal with disappointments and take care of stuff that happens to you. Bad stuff happens to everybody. How do you deal with it? Okay, here we go. One of the more interesting places where people have studied this is the study of identical twins separated at birth. Every graduate class that I went to in the 60s ended up with arguments about nature versus nurture. Is it that way because it's in there, because that's how I was born? Or is it that way because of the way someone raised me or I raised myself? So the ultimate research opportunity there is looking at identical twins, maybe separated at birth. So these research bits are generally speaking found in social psychology. You can Google this and find lots of fun stuff. The hard part is finding subjects, and the other hard part is out of control factors, and the other scary part is the controversies that have evolved over those twin studies. In the 1990s, a fellow by the name of Martin Seligman became the head of the American Psychological Association, and he said as he took office, that too much of psychology had been focused on esoteric and theoretical stuff. More had to be focused on organizational concerns, jobs, and adaptation. And that marked a new chapter in the world of psychology in general. And as that started to happen, economists started to jump all over that as well. So suddenly there were new academic disciplines born. Part of those academic disciplines was looking at macroscopic data. So here's something fun for you. How do you think the United States does on comparative happiness? Well, there are standard measures of happiness that have been in the literature for decades. We could look to see how happy people are in states and regions of the United States, men versus women, married versus unmarried people, or, this is kind of fun and threatening, countries. So how does the United States rank in terms of comparative happiness? That would be job satisfaction, self-esteem, productivity. Well, the answer is not too good. For a country as wealthy and developed as we are, you'd think we do better than 18th of the 66 developed nations and 156 measured countries. On a 10-point scale, that's the standard one that's used. You can find this in the United States Statistical Abstracts if you want to hunt. The United States overall measures 8.886. Canada, for example, our just northern border here, you could see Canada on a clear day from the top of the peninsula. They're way happier than us. They're 7.326, which is significantly higher at a 95% confidence. Why would that be? Now, I know what you're thinking about Canada. They're too socialist. Their medical system doesn't work, or maybe it does. The happiest countries are in this order, and it shifts around and changes a bit, but the last time I looked, Finland was first, Norway was second, Denmark was third, Iceland was fourth, Switzerland was fifth, the United States is 18th. We could be doing better. What are the things about those other countries that seem to correlate with happiness? And we could do that with studies as well. A, healthcare quality. The higher the quality is objectively, the higher the happiness. Would I be saying that the Canadian healthcare system is of higher quality than ours? Yes, I would, on average. Now, there are some American people, United States people, that have high-end care, concierge care. Their healthcare is probably better than any Canadian, but on average, the Canadian healthcare system is way better than ours. Longevity. Canadians live longer than us. Infant mortality. Their infant mortality is better. And also the percentage of GDP expended on healthcare. Here's another fun one. Time commuting to work. Tell my son, how long does it take him to get to work? He works in the San Francisco Bay Area. Well, depending upon what time he leaves, either 35 minutes or 2.5 hours. There have been some big data longitudinal studies now in an area called behavioral economics. This is the hybrid between organizational psychology and economics, and maybe some people say biology. There are 3 Nobel Prizes in the last 10 years. There's the evolution of a brand new discipline called evolutionary psychology. Those are the people that are telling us how much of that stuff is baked in. There's the work of, and you should write these names down and think about Googling them, Daniel Kahneman, Richard Thaler, Richard Schiller. And there's nudge theory, which is pretty exciting. Let's say you're not a wild kind of put on your sneakers and go out and walk and run and jump up and down kind of person. Is there an alternative approach to getting happier? Well, I recommend John Cabot's Zen, meditation-based stress relief, MBSR. You can buy this course online and do it. It's way worth it. Think of John Cabot Zen as me, who spent his entire life in hospital settings in the Massachusetts area rather than academia. He spent his entire life studying how to teach people to meditate, to be mindful, and trying to connect that to their happiness. Some other stuff you could read if you want to stretch your mind. I'm a big fan of Thich Nhat Hanh. I'm a bigger fan of Anthony DeMello and his book Awareness. I used to use that as a secondary textbook in my introduction to organizational psychology class. Other big data connections, and maybe there's a lesson or two here. The more sugar you eat, the more inflammation you have, and the less you're going to be happy. Go look up the work of Hyman at the Cleveland Clinic. The meaningfulness of your work and/or the meaningfulness of your retirement drives your happiness. Actual relationship networks, not social media. Age connects with happiness. Your happiness goes up and down and up and down and up and down. So the bottom cycles of age are 43 for men, 55 for men, and slightly earlier than those ages for women. Also gender. Men are happier than women, and they've been for a long time. We can see that in the big data. Marriage. As long as you have a happy marriage, you're going to be way happier than anybody else. In fact, if you look in the United States Statistical Abstracts, you'll see that married people report being happier regardless of the apparent quality of their marriages. Finances, the more comfortable you are financially, doesn't mean the more wealthy you are, the happier you'll be. And personality. Authoritarian people tend to be less happy than non-authoritarian people. And I have a book that you might want to be thinking about reading. This comes in handy for those of us that live on the waters of Lake Erie. There's a wonderful book called Blue Mind that you can Google. And that Blue Mind people, nice research, argue that the more of your life you live on, by, in, near, or with water, the happier you will be. There's some interesting countries to study as well. Make some notes. Look up Bhutan, Sardinia, and Okinawa. Those are places where there's stunning happiness and longevity. And just one last recommendation. I used to teach this stuff to my students, graduate students. They would say, why didn't we ever hear about any of this stuff before? And I would say, turn off the television set and read. Don't let important stuff like this sneak up on you. Thank you.